A German infantryman ducks for cover, only to see something no training prepared him for: the muzzle flash of the American M2 Browning .50 caliber machine gun. In that instant, the war's balance of power shifts. Walls, armor, and even low-flying Luftwaffe planes are suddenly paper-thin. Feared and hated across the battlefield, the weapon behind the phrase was not just a gun, it was the legend that shattered what soldiers thought was safe. But how did this American invention rewrite the rules of combat, and why did its arrival inspire such terror? The answer begins long before its first shot was fired. In 1917, as the thunder of artillery echoed across Europe, General John Pershing faced a problem that no existing weapon could solve. American rifle-caliber machine guns, firing the .3006 round, were nearly useless against the new threats: tanks crawling across no man's land and armored aircraft streaking overhead. Pershing sent out a simple but demanding order: develop a machine gun that could fire a half-inch projectile at nearly 2,700 feet per second, powerful enough to punch through armor and reach targets far beyond the range of standard infantry weapons. John Browning, already known for his M1911 pistol and the M1917 machine gun, took up the challenge. He didn't just tweak an old design, he scaled up everything. The ammunition itself had to be invented from scratch. Winchester engineers worked in parallel, creating the .50 BMG cartridge, 12.7 by 99 mm, a round that dwarfed anything in the American arsenal. Browning's prototype was a beast, a water-cooled machine gun built to handle the fierce recoil and heat of these massive rounds. By late 1918, the first models were ready for testing. The war ended before they could reach the front, but the weapon's potential was clear. The M1921, as it was first called, was a technical marvel for its time, firing a projectile twice the diameter and several times the weight of a standard rifle bullet. The combination of Browning's scaled-up design and Winchester's new cartridge laid the foundation for a weapon that would soon change the nature of combat. The world had never seen a machine gun like this before, and the American military suddenly held the blueprint for a new kind of firepower. The MIM 1921 was a mechanical giant, but it came with burdens that soon became impossible to ignore. Weighing in at over 120 pounds before even adding the tripod or a single belt of ammunition, the gun demanded a crew just to move it from one spot to another. Infantry squads struggled to haul the weapon across muddy fields and shattered roads. Even for vehicle crews, mounting the M1921 meant wrestling with its bulk and hoping the platform could take the strain. The recoil was punishing. Each shot sent a jolt through the frame, rattling the gunner's hands and threatening to shake bolts loose. Sustained fire could quickly overheat the barrel, despite the water cooling system. Reloading under pressure was a test of muscle and coordination, not just skill. For the men assigned to operate it, the M1921 was less a tool and more a stubborn beast that needed constant wrangling. On paper, the gun's firepower looked impressive. In practice, its sheer size and awkwardness limited where it could be used. Infantry couldn't carry it into battle without slowing to a crawl. Early aircraft mounts fared no better. Cockpits and turrets weren't built to handle its weight, and the gun's recoil could throw off a plane's aim or even damage the mounting. The M1921 was quickly relegated to static roles: coastal defense, anti-aircraft batteries, or fortress emplacements where its power could be used without worrying about mobility. Instead of changing the battlefield overnight, the M1921 found itself boxed in by its own ambition. The promise of unstoppable firepower clashed with the reality of a weapon that was often too heavy, too unwieldy, and too specialized for the fast-moving war that was coming. The need for a true universal machine gun, one that could go anywhere and do anything, became impossible to ignore. After John Browning's death in 1926, the challenge of transforming his massive prototype into a weapon for a new era fell to Colt engineers and the US Army Ordnance Board. The breakthrough came with the development of a universal receiver, a single frame that could accept either a water-cooled or air-cooled barrel. This modular approach meant the same gun could be fitted for ground combat, anti-aircraft defense, or aircraft use simply by swapping out a few parts. Another key innovation was the ambidextrous feed system. By allowing the gun to accept ammunition belts from either side, engineers made it easier to mount the weapon on any vehicle or turret and simplified logistics for crews under fire. The decision to stick with the .50 caliber round was not made lightly. While other countries moved to larger, heavier cannons, American planners calculated that mass-producing a high-velocity, versatile .50 would give their forces a unique edge. The .50 BENG round could defeat most light armor, reach out to extreme ranges, and be adapted for both aircraft and ground roles. This focus on adaptability and logistics was matched by the industrial power behind it. By the late 1930s, factories like Ford's River Rouge and GM's Frigidaire plant were poised to churn out barrels and receivers by the thousands, using assembly lines that could shift from making cars to making machine guns almost overnight. The result was a weapon system that could be everywhere at once. The M2 Browning, as it was now known, was no longer tied to static defenses or niche roles. It was ready to be mounted on tanks, trucks, planes, and ships, wherever American forces needed firepower. The groundwork was in place for the M2 to become a defining force in the coming global conflict. American engineers didn't just shrink the M2 for aircraft, they rebuilt it for the sky. The air-cooled AN/M2, and later, the even lighter AN/M3, transformed Browning's machine gun into a mainstay of US air power. By the early 1940s, American bombers and fighters bristled with .50 caliber barrels. The B-17 Flying Fortress carried up to 13 M2s, each one aimed at a different slice of the sky. The P-47 Thunderbolt, an icon of ground attack and air superiority, packed 8. The A-26 Invader could unleash 18. This wasn't just about numbers. Aircraft versions of the M2 fired faster, up to 1,200 rounds per minute in some configurations. Gunners could lay down a curtain of lead that filled the air with deadly potential. Enemy pilots who once felt safe behind armor or at the edge of range now found themselves shredded by overlapping fields of fire. A single pass from a B-17 could mean dozens of .50 caliber streams converging on an attacking fighter, tearing through engines, wings, and fuel tanks. For the crews inside these planes, the M2 was both shield and sword. Gunners manned their turrets with a sense of confidence, knowing their Browning could reach out farther than most enemy weapons. Each burst was a warning to any Luftwaffe pilot thinking of closing in. In the Pacific, the same firepower chewed through Japanese aircraft, setting fuel tanks ablaze and sending attackers spiraling into the sea. The sky over Europe and the Pacific became a domain where volume mattered as much as accuracy. American aircrews trusted their .50s to keep the enemy at bay, and the relentless staccato of synchronized M2s became the soundtrack of air superiority. The Ma-Deuce didn't just defend. Mounted in such numbers, it dominated, turning every bomber and fighter into a fortress bristling with steel. By 1944, the ground war in Europe belonged to the Browning .50. American tanks, half-tracks, and even jeeps rolled forward with an M2 mounted high, its long barrel ready to answer any threat. For German infantry, this changed everything. The .50 BMG round delivered 5 to 10 times the energy of a standard rifle bullet. What once counted as cover, brick walls, sandbag nests, even the armored skirts of scout cars, could be shredded in seconds. Reports from the Normandy campaign describe hedgerows collapsing under streams of .50 caliber fire, and corners of stone farmhouses blasted open, exposing defenders who thought they were safe. German squad leaders learned to recognize the sound, a deep, mechanical thump that signaled no ordinary firefight. In the Ardennes, after-action reports warned that moving in groups near American lines was a death sentence. Every time the big machine gun fired, someone was hit. The .50 could jam a tank's turret ring, smash optics, and chew up tracks, forcing armored crews to bail out or retreat. Light and medium vehicles stood little chance. Half-tracks and armored cars were cut open, their crews left with nowhere to hide. This raw kinetic power forced a change in German tactics. Instead of rushing American positions, infantry tried to neutralize .50 nests with mortars, snipers, or supporting armor. Smoke screens became essential. Some units even avoided certain routes altogether, knowing a single M2 could lock down a crossroads or field. The psychological effect was just as real as the physical damage. Letters and diaries from the front describe a constant awareness. If the Marduce was nearby, the only safe place was out of sight. The battlefield had been rewritten, no cover was guaranteed, and every approach carried the threat of sudden, unstoppable fire. The M2 Browning's power comes from its engineering as much as its ammunition. Each time the trigger is pulled, the barrel and bolt recoil together, locked tight while chamber pressure is at its peak. Only once the bullet has left the muzzle do they separate. The spent case is ejected, a fresh round is stripped from the belt, and the cycle repeats. The heavy barrel visibly jumps with every shot, a mechanical rhythm that became familiar to anyone who served near one. Rumors swirled among soldiers about the legality of the .50 BMG round. Some claimed the Geneva Convention banned its use against infantry, but official doctrine and legal reviews told a different story. The Geneva and Hague Conventions never mentioned caliber limits. The American Judge Advocate General's office clarified in multiple memos. The M2 was lawful for use against both personnel and equipment. The myth likely grew from field confusion and the sheer brutality of the wounds it caused, not from any actual ban. The M2's reputation was also shaped by the variety of ammunition it could fire. Standard ball rounds were deadly enough, but armor-piercing cartridges could punch through an inch of hardened steel at close range. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds ignited fuel and set vehicles or aircraft ablaze. Armor-piercing incendiary tracer added a visible arc, letting gunners walk fire onto distant targets, even at 2 kilometers. Belts were often mixed, tailored for the mission: anti-aircraft, ground support, or strafing. Each type added a new layer to the weapon's versatility, giving American units an answer for almost any threat. On the battlefield, the M2 was more than just a machine gun. It was a toolkit of destruction, its impact measured in shattered vehicles, burning aircraft, and the changed tactics of every enemy who faced it. 4 M2 Brownings chained together on a single powered turret created a new kind of threat: the M45 Maxim mount, known to every American crew as the Quad .50. The original purpose was to sweep the skies clean of low-flying aircraft, a problem that had plagued Allied columns since the first days in Normandy. But as the Luftwaffe faded and the front lines shifted, the Quad .50 found a second life pointed straight at the ground. After-action reports from the Battle of the Bulge describe entire German platoons pinned down or scattered by the sheer volume of fire. Each gun could fire up to 600 rounds per minute. Together, the quad spewed a torrent of bullets that chewed through trees, stone, and flesh with terrifying speed. Infantrymen called it the meat chopper. In the chaos of an assault, the roar of 4 Browning barrels was enough to halt an advance or break a counterattack before it started. The Maxim mount didn't disappear after the war. It rode into Korea and Vietnam, bolted to trucks and half-tracks, wherever American forces needed overwhelming firepower. Carlos Hathcock, a Marine sniper in Vietnam, once set his sights far beyond the limits of any standard rifle. Using a scoped M2 Browning, he recorded a confirmed kill at 2,500 yards, nearly a mile and a half. The shot became legend, but it was the gun's adaptability that made it possible. The same weapon that poured fire from tanks and aircraft could, in careful hands, reach out with surgical precision. Yet for every story of a single bullet finding its mark, thousands of gunners faced a different reality. M2 crews perched atop tanks or jeeps were always exposed. The muzzle flash and thunderous report made them instant targets. Enemy snipers, mortars, and machine guns all hunted the gunner first, knowing that silencing the .50 meant safety for everyone else. In Vietnam and later wars, the military began adding steel shields and, eventually, remote weapon stations to give gunners a fighting chance. The burden of the Mar-Deuce was always double-edged, unmatched reach and power, paid for in risk and sacrifice. A century after John Browning's original design, the M2 still holds its place on the front lines, not as a museum piece, but as a living weapon. The latest version, the M2A1, brings the gun into the digital age while keeping its heart unchanged. The quick change barrel system, introduced with the M2A1, lets crews swap a hot barrel in seconds, even while under fire. No more fumbling with headspace gauges or risking a jam at the worst moment. A new flash suppressor tames the muzzle blast, making it harder for enemy forces to spot the gunner's position at night. For the first time, a manual safety is standard, reducing accidental discharges in the chaos of combat. But the real leap comes with remote weapon stations. On modern vehicles, the M2 sits behind armored glass, aimed and fired with digital sights and thermal cameras. Gunners operate from inside, shielded from incoming fire, using joystick controls to lay down precise bursts at targets a mile away. Reports from Afghanistan and Iraq show the same .50 caliber thunder-clearing rooftops, stopping vehicles, and deterring ambushes, just as it did in Normandy and Korea. The core mechanism remains as Browning built it, but the M2A1 proves that smart upgrades can keep even a century-old design brutally effective on the modern battlefield. By 1945, nearly every American tank and half-track carried an M2 Browning, and the .50 caliber round delivered 5 to 10 times the energy of standard rifle ammunition. As documented in US Army after-action reports and German soldier memoirs, the arrival of the M2 on the battlefield forced changes in enemy tactics and left a lasting psychological impact, while the exact number of enemy vehicles destroyed by the .50 BMG remains difficult to verify. Official records confirm its effectiveness against light armor, aircraft, and fortified positions. Some technical details, such as the full extent of its post-war modifications, remain classified. Today, the M2A1 serves on modern vehicles with only minor upgrades, a century after John Browning's original design. The evidence is clear. The M2's combination of firepower, reliability, and adaptability reshaped combat, earning its place as one of the most enduring weapons in military history.